Okie dokie, first think piece of the channel, this should be good. Let's preface this by saying this video is going to be one part singing the praises of the single greatest thing to ever happen to this trash heap of a franchise, and 9 parts ripping to shreds one of his first official creations. Get it? Got it? Good. If I'm thankful for any writer, it would be Ian Flynn. For those who don't know, Ian Flynn was the former head writer for the Sonic Archie comics, and the current head writer of the upcoming Sonic IDW comics. This man is renowned for taking what was, at the time, the worst part of the Sonic franchise and turned it into the best part. Being a fan of the series as a whole, Ian has done a fantastic job with creating stories that both introduce new elements and paying homage to the works of the past. When he first started on the main book in issue 160, the difference in writing was an instant breath of fresh air that helped cement his influence into the franchise as he only improved over time. Thing is though, as good as his early stuff was compared to what came before, there was still plenty wrong with it that was understandably overlooked at the time. One such problem was when he tried to fix something that wasn't broken. Enter Scourge. Yeah, so like Peter Parker or Princess Twilight, Sonic had about a metric fuck ton of arch rivals meant to mirror him in one way or another. One of the earliest examples of this was from the comics where we met a literal evil Sonic from another dimension. Now this is a concept that has been done to death far before these comics ever even began, and it wasn't handled with that much originality up to this point. Thing is though, Ian had been doing a lot of spring cleaning at the start of his run, and I guess, instead of just getting rid of this guy, he decided, let's literally mutate him into a different character and give him depth, thus giving us Scourge the Hedgehog, a green Sonic with sharp teeth, a leather jacket, and sunglasses. Now, if this sounds completely stupid to you, well that's because it is, but that's not the reason why Scourge didn't work. After getting his new look, Scourge went on to raise a fair bit of hell, from stealing Sonic's woman to waging war on his whole world, back when it was still called Mobius. Now, this is all perfectly fine, even with the unnecessary makeover. It would have been great for merchandising if Sega had wanted to capitalize on that, which I'm surprised that they didn't. No. The problem arises in his third appearance, though that's not entirely apparent at this point. Don't worry, we'll get to that. See, after Sonic gives a rebuttal to a horribly abridged version of the famous Killing Joke monologue, Scourge begins to question himself and what he can be really doing. So naturally, he takes this as incentive to go back to conquer his home planet before coming back to take Mobius. Now, this in and of itself is pretty cool as we get to see Sonic and the Freedom Fighters take on their anti-counterparts. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is right around the middle of this arc where Scourge has a talk with Sonic's dad, and they try to make Scourge a sympathetic character. Now, it's not impossible to make a sympathetic villain, much less a rival. Part of Shadow's initial appeal was that he had a mysterious past deeply rooted in tragedy. Regardless of whether or not you think the intent of his character was executed successfully, it was at least all premeditated, and he was built around the concept. Scourge, on the other hand, has been nothing but a piece of shit since day one, and only now are they trying to give him any depth. Oh, and what tragic past did Scourge have to make him into the monster he had become? He was lonely because his daddy wasn't around because he was running the kingdom, so Scourge killed him. That's literally it. Even by the standards of this franchise, that's pretty weak. I mean, for God's sakes, Shadow watched his first friend get shot to death. Silver's attacked Sonic and company out of a desperate, misguided attempt to save his future. I think we're well past the notion of bad parenting for villainous motivation. But hold on, it gets worse. After this arc was wrapped up, we see Scourge being sent to interdimensional prison. Here he's depowered and having his ass kicked on a regular basis by other ne'er-do-wells in the prison. It's framed in such a way that you'd be forgiven for thinking we're supposed to feel sorry for him. Except, I don't. This guy is pure evil and he deserves every bit of suffering he's getting. It's not like this was done to make him at all humble or get him to question his entire worldview. No. Once his girlfriend Fiona Fox and her hired thugs manage to come in and break him out, he goes back to being the malicious, opportunistic scumbag he's always been. I'm not saying it's wrong to try and give antagonists a layer of complexity, I'm saying that in Scourge's case, it's too little too late. What could have been a fun, serviceable villain turns into a character with the illusion of complexity, complete with a half-baked sob story and moments of suffering that carry no weight to them because of what the character has done up to this point. This is to say nothing about the dangling plot thread of the potentially abusive relationship between Scourge and Fiona, which, thank God, never went anywhere because this is the absolute worst franchise to tackle such a topic. If there were a character in the Sonic franchise that deserves the title of Shitty OC, of which there are many contenders, it should be Scourge. So why did this happen? Well, as I said, Scourge was the result of Ian trying to fix something that wasn't broken, namely the idea of an evil Sonic and by extension, what that said about Sonic himself. Because simply put, the blue blur isn't much as far as characters go because he's not allowed to be. Oh sure, he can be enjoyable, what with his carefree attitude and his strong sense of right and wrong, but in terms of actually writing for him, there's only so much that can be done because of the mandate Sega has for portraying Sonic, so it can be kind of unsatisfying to write for him. As such, writers have to look to other characters to try and flesh them out and be more engaging, especially in the comics. So by creating a character that both was and wasn't Sonic, Scourge was intended to serve a purpose of giving complexity to the Blue Hedgehog by challenging his convictions. Unfortunately, this all rings hollow, as Sonic was not permitted to ever change his outlook on life, and the foil that Scourge was intended to be was already done with Shadow and done better. I know it's unfair to criticize something without suggesting ways it can be improved, but in this case it's pretty hard since I've seen what Scourge was intended to be executed better far before he was ever created. If he had been a rival solely intent to just try and best Sonic, like Metal Sonic or Jet the Hawk, Scourge would have been a fine rival. But because he bears the false trappings of complexity, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Luckily, we'll never be seeing him again as we approach the launch of the fresh new IDW Comics continuity, which I am very excited for. Stay tuned for the next video where I lay out my ideas for the inevitable Sonic MLP crossover.